Mark, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
The feeling is mutual, Mark, and you're one of the 1 million years of joy leadership luminaries, which really brings me a lot of joy to be speaking with you today. And as I've been looking at your journey, and you've had so many interesting experiences, so many different titles from CEO to founder to advisor, I was curious if you could share with us, if you were to strip all those titles away, how would you actually describe yourself in a couple of words?
So, I look at my work as, from a leadership point of view, as a fact based leader. When I talk fact based leader, it means my role is to facilitate, advise, coach, and train. My primary focus is to identify barriers that are getting in the way of people to be highly successful, and I focus on being a barrier buster. So, chiefly, being a good coach.
I love the title Barrier Buster. What are some of the barriers that people appear to have and things that are literally standing in their way in terms of finding more joy, finding more fulfillment in life from what you have experienced through your career journey?
Well, how about freedom to speak out, to have a voice? That's really great. And I've encouraged that in all of my organizations. When I new to an organization, one of the first things I ask is, tell me what I need to know, not what you think I want to hear. So when you drive towards candor, and I have very high levels of candor, and I expect my teams to push back on me, and I encourage people to say, oh, I don't understand it, or I may not agree with you. And I love people that will raise their hand and not even raise their hand, just have an open, honest dialogue. And I think that's lacking a lot of organizations where people have this organizational freedom to say what's on their mind, just to make suggestions without fear of retribution. Having a culture like that is very powerful for me and highly impactful.
And having that freedom and that capacity to speak authentically and challenge an opinion, challenge the status quo, often is built on psychological safety. Can you tell us what has been your experience in terms of how leaders can effectively build that psychological safety among their teams?
It starts with trust. And from my perspective and in my entire life and my career, and by the way, I don't have a work persona, and I don't have a husband persona or a dad persona or a grandfather persona. I have a human persona, and people get to see that consistently, no matter where they see me, whether it's shopping at the mall, playing golf, playing tennis, canoeing, or being at work. They get my authentic self. And they also get my vulnerable self. And that's probably something in the last, 10 years or so to learn to build trust with your team, to be authentic and vulnerable, and let them know that I have ideas. Most of them probably may not make sense. And better ideas come from all of us collectively sharing our thoughts and ideas and creating an environment where people say, wow, I can think about that, or that's a problem I can resolve, and I have a voice here. And when you have the collective voice of a collective organization, that's a force multiplier. And that's what I try to create in my organizations, this level of freedom and autonomy, which I think is vital and really needed for highly effective organizations.
Tell us about your purpose and how that has shaped how you live and lead.
I have a personal vision from a leadership point of view, and I'm going to read it because I have it, because I wrote it and I figured this out a long time ago. And this has been the same, which is if I did my job well enough, I could have an excellence focused work group, a personally and carefully crafted and intelligent people selection process focused on delivering effective training and development, organized and engaged work groups operating in an environment of freedom aligned with a compelling purpose, a mission and a vision and shared values bound by a unique and compelling culture. That's what I'm all about. That's what I try to create. I share this with every team I join. So this is what my intention is. I also have a set of maybe 14 or 15 guiding principles as a leader that I use. I share those with everybody. Here's where they are. I'll share you a quick story about my transparency. I joined an organization as a leader, as a CEO. I had one-on-ones with every single person in the organization, which they found strange and said, no one's ever done that before. I said, well, I got a lot to learn and you know the most. So I spoke with them. And then we broke out into smaller work groups, and we were in a big conference room, and they said, well, what would your wife think about that? What would she say? I said, well, you're asking the wrong person. Maybe you should ask my wife. Well, she was working for a private equity firm. I said, hold on, let's give her a call. I put her on the speakerphone. I said, Sydney, I have my team here. They want to know about these questions. I'm going to let you chat with them. I'm going to leave the room and have a wonderful time. So 40 minutes later, I get to come back in the room and they had a conversation with my wife and I have no idea what they talked about. But I'm a big believer of, being transparent and open and sharing those perspectives with them. But purpose, is really, really vital, to organizations. And I find that personal purpose and organizational purpose are quite vital in organizations and are a source of alignment and clarity within organizations that are just very, very powerful.
And can you share with us the process that you went through to articulate your purpose that could potentially inspire our listeners to follow in the same footsteps?
I was challenged by a friend of mine. We were talking about our lives and we were talking about very significantly about, what are we here for? What are we doing? And where can we make an impact? And he challenged me to think about that. And this was a number of years ago. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I'm also, as a business leader, I'm a huge fan of having a clear purpose statement for an organization and having a mission and a vision. And I said, well, if I expect that of my organization, I should have my own. So I worked on that. So the purpose statement is the why. It's the why you're around. And for me, it's to unlock potential and drive transformation by fostering a culture of continuous learning, strategic clarity, and performance excellence, creating the freedom for people and teams and organizations to thrive and achieve meaningful and sustainable impact. So that's my purpose statement when it comes to organizations. And again, I share that with everyone. And I also have a mission statement and a vision statement. Maybe we don't talk about it now, but I have those as well because I'm trying to be personally aligned. If I can't be aligned, it's very hard for my organizations to be aligned.
What role do you believe leaders play in helping each individual across their organization find their own individual life purpose?
I think it's surprising that most people, from my experience, really can't articulate their purpose. They haven't thought about it. So when I speak with teams, I share with them my purpose. I said, and here's how I went about doing it. And it's not easy work to be thoughtful and to think about the words and the word choices. So sharing your own and sharing why and talking about why it's meaningful is really, really important. And I think that really helps individuals on teams as they consider their own journey. It's a life journey, and they get a chance to share with me as a leader their life journey in my organization or our organization. It's not my organization. And it gets really exciting because then they start to share with somebody else. Oh, what's your purpose? Okay, fine. But there really has to be alignment. There could be misalignment. Someone may have a purpose that's totally misaligned with what you're trying to do in your organization. And oftentimes what you want to do is build that into your interviewing process or realistic job previews such that people elect to join an organization. It's two-way. When I spend time in our selection process, I let them know. I said, this is a two-way communication. I said, you have a chance to kick the tires. I have a chance to learn about you. We're going to take time to do this well and do it right. And I also built in a realistic job preview where I paid people to come in for a day and observe the organization. I'll pay you for the day, but come and see what we're like. And you're going to get a sense of our culture and our climate. It may be for you, it may not be for you, but you'll get a sense of weighing in on that and you get a chance to make a choice too.
I've taken a similar approach in painting the most realistic picture about what people are getting themselves into. Often, some organizations have this window or this facade that really paints things in a certain way, and then you enter the actual organization and you have huge surprises. So I really, really love what you've just shared and how even bringing a person in for a whole day, I think that's truly an opportunity to give people indeed to get a feeling of the energy, the vibe, the culture, and really see if this is a good fit, because it's very costly as well for organizations when whoever we have hired in whatever role or rank does not necessarily work out as we were hoping. It's a sad reality on both sides.
It is. And I'll share a quick story. In an organization that I joined as a CEO, and I had a chance to spend time with the founder of this organization for 90 days before the founder exited and I took over. I discovered that the average tenure of the average team member, and I call them team members, not employees, was 10 months. This is a 32-year-old company, and the average tenure was 10 months. So it's impossible to move a business along when turnover is that high. And after I left, and I was there for almost 3 years, it was about 3 years for every person. So as I look at my organization, it's probably one of the most prideful moments I've ever had, which is saying, wow, these people stuck around and we got really good people. We actually focused on their development and listened to them and we gave them a voice and we had fun at work. How about that? I had a fun team. I said, all right, I want to create a fun team. I'm going to be on it. And they said, well, what is it? I said, well, if you're interested, you come and see me. And so we created a fun team. I said, your job is just to figure out how do we have fun in this organization, whatever it might be. So we have a budget, but there's other things you can do and we'll see. Like Pi Day, from the mathematical Pi Day. And I was trying to create moments of joy in the organization. We had a beautiful pie retail place in our town where the company was. So I selected a number of different pies that people could have. And I said, pick a pie that you like for your family. So I took the day, stood in front of the pie shop, and I greeted every single person coming in to get their pie and had a chat, met their kids, talked to their mothers, their grandmothers, their kids, other people. So a little moment like that, it doesn't cost a lot of money. That shows that, A, you're human, you care, you're authentic, you have a little bit of fun, it's memorable. People say, well, we didn't have to do that, but that's a cool thing to do. So just a small story.
I truly believe in the power of bringing more joy within organizations. And there's actually extensive research on this. And even psychologists call it the positive affective tone that applies as much to the leaders, to the teams, particularly because emotions are contagious, right? As human beings, if there's a lot of positive vibes around us, if you wish, it becomes a contagious reality that lifts spirits up. And I just love the story that you have shared. Are there other tips for our listeners that may be interested in bringing joy within their organizations? What would you suggest that they do in order to inject more joy, more fun on a regular basis?
Well, I had never done this before, but joy became part of kind of my psyche and what I wanted to do. And for my own personal mantra, my objective is to create and have many moments of joy, to create additional moments of joy and share moments of joy with other people. It's family, friends, or whatever that is. At work, and I said, well, why can't I do this here? So I started asking people when they were leaving the office in the evenings, just randomly, I just thought about it. I said, Mary Jane, what brings you joy? What kind of joy will you be having this weekend? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, what brings you joy? You have some time off. She said, well, knitting. I said, oh, well, what are you going to knit? Well, I'm going to be doing this. I'm doing this for my grandchildren. I'm going to be doing this. I said, wonderful. What else are you going to do you're going to have moments of joy? And she had to think about it. I had some people who couldn't tell me anything about moments of joy. And I started doing that and I kept doing it every week for months and months and months. And then I didn't have to do it anymore because when they'd walk out, hey, Mark, I'm going to be having some joy doing this. I'm going to be baking, a cherry pie. I know you like pies, but I'm going to be doing that. So it was a lot of fun to get people to think about, wow. And I had some people who just didn't have joy in their lives, that my organization became a source of joy for them as a human being. And I never thought about that. And so they started saying, well, I like what they said, or I like with this. I could be doing those sort of things. And it helped them to maybe reframe some of what they were thinking about in their mindsets. So it's a lot of fun. We're on this planet for X amount of time, and it's too short not to have fun and find moments of joy. And it could be little things like behind me is an espresso machine. My greatest joy every day is I make myself espresso, my own handcrafted espresso. I grind my own coffee beans. I roast my own coffee beans. I'm passionate about it. That brings me great joy. My wife phones down before she leaves to go to work saying, is my espresso ready? It brings her joy. My dogs get great joy when I take them out for a walk in a timely fashion. So when you think about all the different ways that you can bring joy to people's lives, it's pretty compelling. How about just saying hello to someone in a grocery store? And they'll say, and put a smile on your face. I walk every single day. I do 4.2 miles a day. And I say hello to every human being I see, even the pets too. But, and it's put a smile on somebody's face. It's not a lot of effort, but it requires some effort.
Indeed, we need some more individuals that bring smiles to others, particularly in the context of everything that we're seeing in this world. And it's funny because I'm like you, I also do walks and I smile, I say hi. And it's interesting because it's true. You're seeing a different energy emerge that is often unexpected.
And then getting back from a leadership perspective, the notion of motivate, inspire, set direction. We have a wonderful opportunity to inspire. I mean, if with family and friends and other people, you can do the same sort of thing. You can have an impact in your ecosystem. So those are fun things to do.
Yes, very fun indeed. And Mark, you have published over 120 articles. And if you could boil down all the things that you have written about into one single belief or philosophy that relates to leadership, what would it be?
Well, I think there are three common themes in my writings. It's performance excellence, it's leadership, leaders, and our impact on organizations and people, and culture. It really falls into those areas. And I write on those because it's my experience. And I'm also learning. Almost all of the articles that I write are evidence based on research. I have ideas. And then I usually explore it and say, is there any validity to what I'm thinking? And I go through that whole process and validate that. Those are the areas that I typically write about. And my objective is to bridge the gap between all the wonderful academic work that's being done out there and all of it that's never shared with anybody because it's mostly academic. When you come from that background, you're writing for journals, and who reads it? Academics. But I'm a practitioner with an academic bent, and I teach at a local university as well. Now, I'd like to reference my work with facts and support it with documentation. So hopefully it's a little bit more compelling.
And you've led many turnarounds, worked with organizations of different sizes, from startups to major companies. What has been the biggest leadership lesson that you have learned from failure?
Yep, I would say listening, being a better listener. I think that's critical. And probably maybe not engaging as many people as I should have before making decisions and bouncing ideas off of people, because you're oftentimes pressed to make decisions and move faster. And I do like moving quickly, and I think you can move fast and do it with a depth of knowledge. But I think in those moments where I wasn't as successful, it was probably lack of clarity and lack of depth of knowledge that maybe held me back.
And since you've touched upon several times about the importance of family, whether it's from the people's or the team's perspective, we all have different lives outside of the office. And I know you have 5 kids. I was curious to learn what parenting has taught you about yourself, and has that influenced in any way your leadership style?
Again, I view my role as a parent, as a coach. I have a responsibility to help guide young minds with experiences. A running joke in my family is that I used to talk about my kids, about cultural enlightenment. I would tell them we would be doing something. They said, what are we going to do today? I said, a little cultural enlightenment. I wouldn't tell them what we were going to be doing. So it could be, I live close to Washington, D.C., so we have many things going on all the time. It would be a festival. It would be something different. We would go to the museums, and I had a rule about going to museums. I said, we're going to go to the museums, and I get kind of rolling eyeballs. But I said, here's the thing. I'll leave when you're ready to leave. If we get there and you want to leave in 10 minutes, and we will walk out the door. So you give them the freedom to explore. You give them the opportunity to think that it's their world, and it is their world. And typically those experiences lasted hours and hours. My 2 daughters loved eating lunch at the museum. So the boys would run around and go see the knights, and my daughters and I would have lunch. So you create moments of exposure and opportunity. And that's no different than how I see business. I create moments of exposure and opportunity for all of my colleagues or people that I work with, challenging opportunities where we're saying, I need your help, and what do you think, and how do we do it, and here's what we can do, and what resource sources do you need. And when you create a fun environment on top of that, it's really good. My world at home and at work are virtually the same, but it's still a coaching role. My wife had a motto, which is keep them alive till they're 25, right? Because they're young minds and their executive function, particularly for young men, doesn't happen until they're, 30? So, getting them to make really good decisions can be a challenge, but I typically don't tell. I share and I coach but I'm not prescriptive. I just say, well, I'll share some information with you and allow them to assimilate that information into something that makes sense for them.
When you're looking at the organizational context today that is filled with multiple generations, when you also have some studies that are indicated that there is a low engagement in some companies on a global scale, while others, of course, are doing amazing things to keeping their teams engaged, what do you believe is needed for executives, for CEOs to be able to bring greater humanity and joy into the workplace?
I would say the greatest thing that they could do is listen, be empathetic, to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And when that happens, I think that people really embrace that and find it very encouraging for them in their careers and in their lives.
If you were to describe a joyful organization, I know you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what would be the overall values and key behaviors that you would most likely see from all the experience that you've had to date?
That's a great question. Again, based on my research, because this is an area that's evolving for me professionally, that joy creates conditions of trust. It's really pretty rather amazing. It drives creativity in organization. It drives real engagement of people when you're able to do these sort of things. And when you look at it, joy typically is undervalued as a competitive advantage for organizations. So it truly becomes a competitive advantage for many organizations when done well.
Has your view on joy changed over the years?
I would say I didn't use the word over the years. It's probably been in the last 5 years where it became part of my regular lexicon and part of my practice in life, to create moments of joy and to have other people experience greater moments of joy. I don't foist it upon people, but it's an effort that I engage in. And I don't hear many other business leaders talk about joy. You're starting to see leaders talk about the role of love in organizations and human beings and embracing the humanity of what we're all about. But there's a lot we can do as leaders to create more joyful places. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. Food is a really great way, right? Anything that revolves around food. And in my last organization where I was a CEO, we had lots of food days. We had cultural food days because we had a really nice, diverse team, which I'm a big fan of diversity of people and backgrounds and, where they've come from. And the food is a great sort of thing. So food's a great thing that we used to do all the time. That and then dessert days are really good too.
And if you have a team that is really in the middle of tremendous crisis, transformation, burnout, what would you recommend that the leader of that team do in order to reignite the joy within the team?
Yeah, I think it's a leader that's attuned with their team that will see and feel this happening. If you're focused, I had a really great leader at one time that had a statement. He said, you can't make impact without contact. At one time, I had a business unit with 235 locations and 1,000 people. And I was thinking about culture and what I was trying to do. And I was telling my wife, I said, I own the culture in all of those locations. She said, how can you do that? I said, first of all, I have to visit all of them, which I do. But you make culture part of what you do, and you make culture something that's reinforcing, and you make culture live. Culture, shared values are things that are just not on paper. They're not marketing statements. They're not branding elements. They're like real things. You can walk into a place with a culture, whether it's bad or not, or toxic, and I've been in toxic cultures before, you can feel it walking in the door. You don't know if it's a happy place, if it's a joyful place, if it's tedious, if it's tedium, if no one's has a head up, if you walk in and no one greets you. I mean, you can learn a lot and by sensing and feeling just by having your antennas up. So as a leader in tough situations, you realize maybe when people are being pushed too far, you may need to give people a break. I had a senior leadership team, and one of my leaders was pushing really hard. And I said, George, you love golf, don't you? He said, yeah. I said, you need to go play a round of golf today. See you tomorrow. So letting people know that you sense how they're feeling, and then also to let them know that you're a resource for them, that they don't have to do this all themselves. And you're there to be a resource and support them. And I've always saw it as my duty and responsibility to own development plans of all of my team members. And I used to meet with them weekly, monthly, quarterly. I never did annual reviews. I did reviews every single day, giving real-time feedback. And I think that's the other point. Providing people with real-time feedback, being open and honest and direct. My kids are challenged by that because they know they're always going to get a very direct answer. And you hear the phrase, deal with the brutal facts. You deal with the brutal facts, but you don't do it brutally. You do it empathetically. You understand, but you work really hard at getting to the facts and then understanding and then repeating it back and saying, oh, if I understand you correctly, I'm sensing the following. And they'll tell you whether or not you're right. But you also have to create a culture where they're going to be open to be able to tell you those sort of things. So it's that engagement, because it started from engagement. Engagement data is terrible, right? Globally, 3 out of 10 people are engaged. That's in the United States. It's less outside of the United States. And 70% of managers are okay or poor, which tells us something about what we can do with joy and engagement and being people-centric. People still drive the business.
I fully agree. When we're looking at how certain leaders are pursuing the path of organizational transformation, and who actually prioritize mainly the financial KPIs. How do we bring in that human touch and allow leaders to see the research, to better understand the power of those positive emotions that can actually be a fuel to accelerate business results?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that question. I published an article today on lagging versus leading indicators, and putting human factor leading indicators into your metrics and working on those sort of things and making those viable and visible to people really, really helps. So looking at people's development, growth, and happiness and joy, probably a leading indicator of what can happen in an organization. Guess what happens when that happens? People tend to go the extra mile. They tend to think outside the box. In my organization, we didn't have a box because I said, I'm not a big fan of boxes. We have a playing field. Let's figure out what it is. And just an interesting story. In my last organization, I didn't have a title. I got rid of my title as a CEO, took it off. I didn't use it. I literally took the door off my office. First thing I did as soon as the founder left, they had 2 big oak doors. It was like a sanctum sanctorum. And I said, okay, who are the 2 biggest people who can take these doors off of here? The office was huge. There was like 2 conference rooms and 3 desks, and there were 2 people in there. I said, and I went out and I told all the team members, I said, by the way, there's a conference room in here. You can come in here and have lunch. You can meet anytime. I work in a little corner here, but anyone can use the space for anything, presentations, lunch, fun things, whatever it is. So when you engage people, and engaging team members is an intentional act. So when you're intentional about engagement and intentional about joy, intentional about fun, intentional about making your organization a people-centric organization, no matter what's going on, even with all the AI, we're still driven by what people can do and the creativity and the innovation. Where does that happen? That's not going to come from AI. It's going to come from human beings who are thinking about things. So give them a reason to say, wow, I can use my brain power for so many exciting things that I'm going to share it with this organization. That becomes quite compelling.
What role do you believe AI plays within organizational evolution?
We are going through an amazing phase change with organizational evolution and how they're going to be designed and what they will look like. And I just want to remind everyone that this is about augmenting our intelligence. It's a democratization of the power of the world of knowledge at your fingertips. It will help us make speedier decisions, better decisions, more effective decisions, and I think it will make organizations even better. People will find their place. using AI as a very effective tool. We're figuring that out. And I think those who learn very quickly and learn to leverage it as a partner in your world and how to help you make speedier, more effective decisions and provide that information within your organization will be great. I'm quite optimistic about AI in the universe and the power of taking all that information out of the hands of the few and putting it into a many. I wrote a recent article about that topic, the few and the many. I think people will become mobilized in a very positive way with AI. So I'm very excited about the prospects of it. Hard to figure out what it might look like, but I'm pretty excited about what it can do for organizations and for people.
As we look ahead into a brighter future, and if you could recommend a recipe for living more joyfully, what would be the three main ingredients?
I think doing the work for yourself to say, what are the things that bring wonderful joy to me? And really seriously think about that. I once told my team, I said, 80% of what I do as a CEO, I don't like to do. That doesn't bring them joy. I do those because it gets me to the 20% that brings me an amazing level of joy. Getting to see people smile, getting people excited to come to work. The best compliment I ever received from anyone in my career is in my last organization where my CTO said, I'm never leaving this place. We are having way too much fun. I couldn't have bought that kind of feedback. I didn't ask for it. He just said it out of the blue. He said, this is really pretty darn amazing. And very frankly, oftentimes where you work, the culture, the climate, whatever you want to create, the roles that all of us play, could be more exciting and more fun than what happens at home for some people. It may be an outlet for people of creativity and innovation that they might struggle with. And people oftentimes will recognize that and say, wow, this keeps me here. And why would I go anyplace else? Because I'm having too much and I'm learning stuff and I'm being challenged. Now, I love to challenge my teams, but most human beings like to be challenged and say, oh, give me something different. I'm going to learn something new. How about the notion of a highly adaptive learning organization? That's what I love to create, a highly adaptive organization where you're continuing to face new challenges and figure out how to do it. And you do it collectively, fun and joy all wrapped up in one.
Amazing. And if you were to look at everything that you have learned to date in your life from both your personal experience and your professional experience, and if you could write a message on a billboard for millions or billions of people to see, what would it say?
I would say joy is a wonderful thing. Please take time in your life to have it and share it with other people.
Amazing. Mark, any final words of wisdom that you may wish to share with our audience?
Yeah, a couple of comments for me is things that bring me joy is seeing people grow, people I work with, family, friends, and also having those experiences where people continue to have ongoing dialogue. And so if we share the stories, people will have this ongoing dialogue about joy and cultures that create amazing situations. I think they'll have happier lives as well. I think that's really important.
Mark, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Delight to be here, and let's create more moments of joy.